But Professor Marandi doesn't need any introduction. For all this time, his sage wisdom has talked us through many a crisis, talked us through many atrocities. But it's my great regret that I have to talk to him this evening on the atrocities taking place by Muslims on Muslims in a Muslim country, namely Sudan. Professor Mohammed Marandi, welcome as always to the mother of all talk shows. I've seldom been as horrified as I was today. Perhaps I oughtn't to have watched them, but I watched so many videos today of such crimes as are almost unspeakable, and the more unspeakable because the name of God was being chanted by the murderers as they slayed innocent and defenseless people. Most people watching this will not know much about the conflict in Sudan, who's who and what's what, and I'm hoping your expertise can enlighten them. What is happening in Sudan, Professor?
Well, Sudan was the largest country in Africa, George, and you know Africa better than I, and you know Sudan better than I. But the West didn't want the Sudan to be a strong and powerful force, and they began destroying the country with the separatist movement in South Sudan. And now South Sudan, which is separate, is just as poor and impoverished and full of infighting and death and destruction as is the rest of the country. Of course, the last few days, the last couple of days have been extraordinary. And I think really the root cause here is the United Arab Emirates. The United Arab Emirates has been funding the RSF, and they've been funding groups across the board. And this is a problem that exists both with the United Arab Emirates and Qatar and some of these other oil-rich Arab dictatorships in the Persian Gulf, which have been funding groups everywhere. They're, of course, both in the U.S. camp, both Qatar and the Emirates, and they've been funding differing groups in different parts of the world. But in this case, the Emirates has been pushing very hard, and this group has been utterly brutal and barbaric and murderous. And I saw one or two clips, and I just couldn't finish watching. But this is not over. It's going to the RSF is consolidating its strength, and I think that they're moving towards dividing Sudan yet again into two parts. But we'll have to see what lies ahead. But it's extraordinary how ruthless and murderous people can be, just taking ordinary people and slaughtering them. What we've seen for the last 2 years in Gaza has made everyone, I think, sick enough, and now watching the scenes in Sudan just make it much more saddening. I don't want to say depressing, because none of us should become depressed. We have to remain active and remain steadfast in our activism against empire and against the brutality of these dictatorships and ruthless regimes in the region, especially these wealthy oil and gas regimes which are bound to the empire.
They've got such a cuddly reputation in the West. The United Arab Emirates, which once are revered in the time of the late Sheikh Zayed, he built something special in the United Arab Emirates, and they've got such a cuddly image in the West. People go there on holidays, they invest in apartments there, they have sports competitions galore there, They're the best friends of Donald Trump, the best friends of the British, and so on. And yet they are arming and funding slaughterers that make ISIS look like Boy Scouts. I've never seen anything like, even in the ISIS, the height of ISIS, what I watched today. How would they justify that, Professor? How do they say to their own people, to their allies, yeah, sure, we're behind that. What are you going to do?
Well, these are absolute monarchies in the Emirates and Qatar. You cannot say anything there. The people in these countries have no rights. Overwhelmingly, the people in these countries are, I'm sure you know, indentured servants, if not slaves. And those people have absolutely nothing. They have absolutely no opportunity to say anything. Then you have the better off indentured servants and slaves that are from the West. And then you have the citizens. But the citizens, they have no right to protest or speak out against these policies. And what's happening today is not really new. The genocide in Yemen that the Saudis and the Emiratis carried out for years was something that led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people in that country, and they were using mercenaries from Sudan against the people of Yemen back then to carry out genocide too. So this is not new for the current ruler in the Emirates. And the Emirates is also well known for other forms of corruption, both prostitution, but more importantly perhaps is the fact that a lot of the drug trade that goes on in this part of the world, the money goes through the Emirates, just like Colombia, where the president spoke about the powerful people behind the drug trade being in New York. When he said that they are not far off from the United Nations building. The people who are behind the drug trade in Latin America, and right now we see Trump bombing boat after boat, murdering innocent people from different nationalities. The real people behind this many of them are in the United States. And in our part of the world, the people behind the drug trade are largely in the United Arab Emirates, or if they're not in the Emirates, the money flows through the Emirates.
I'm glad you made that segue to Latin America, because I wanted to come to Venezuela next. Both of us are well familiar with Venezuela. We both know that we can't speak for the whole country, of course, but we are both aware that there are millions of Venezuelans who are armed and ready to fight any invasion. I find it hard to believe that Trump is going to land soldiers on boots on the ground in Venezuela, because that would be the end of his presidency. It would be marked just as Lyndon Johnson's was in the Vietnam era. It would be marked forever. He would be marked forever as the president who caused massive military casualties amongst his own armed forces. But it seems likely that they're going to start bombing, shelling the people of Venezuela, and it's difficult to see what good could come of that. It certainly will not stop the flow of refugees. It certainly will not stop the flow of drugs from Latin America to North America, because of the reasons you've just adumbrated, and the pictures will not look good either in international public opinion. What's your take as a former professor of American studies on what Trump is really up to in Venezuela?
Well, I think that if we look at what the Israeli regime is doing in West Asia, and how it's trying to control West Asia, that is in the interest of the United States. If these family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf are weakened and intimidated in a way in which the United States has further control of the oil and gas wealth, and then you combine that with the oil wealth in Venezuela, that would leave the United States in a much stronger position. And it would leave China in a more vulnerable position, because China would be increasingly dependent on Russian oil. But I agree completely with what you say about Venezuela. I've been there a few times as well, and it is a beautiful country and a wonderful people, a very friendly people. There's no doubt that despite all the sanctions and the brutality of the sanctions regime, the government has a lot of support. And there's no doubt that that support comes mostly from the lower middle classes. And if the United States were to invade the country, then I think there will be enormous resistance, but also people will flow in from other parts of Latin America, and hostility towards the United States across Latin America will grow. In fact, the United States has succeeded over the years through a combination of both the sanctions and propaganda. They've succeeded in demonizing Venezuela to a degree across the continent. But now, because of the behavior of the United States and the reaction that it's getting, including, for example, from the president of Colombia, people are turning against the United States. And some of those people will join the fight. Venezuela is a part of a continent, as you rightly pointed out. It is full of, part of the Amazon forest is in Venezuela. That's how dense the forest is there, and that's the sort of, it reminds one of Vietnam, and that would be horrific for U.S. soldiers who are supposed to be occupying the country. But I do think that the Americans will probably start bombing. They will provide excuses, just like the Israeli regime does. The Israeli regime says that a soldier died, who knows if that's how that happened, and then it slaughtered 104 people since last night, and the United States basically supported it and said, yes, there's been no violation. The president, the vice president of the United States. So when the United States can condone mass murder, the slaughter of tens of children last night, and smile and walk away, if that's what American leaders can do in West Asia, they can certainly find an excuse to start slaughtering people in Venezuela. But I think that they're not going. I don't think that the Americans are going to win this one. I think basically what they're going. This is going to be costly. Even the air campaign, having all those ships in the Caribbean is very costly. Then you're going to have people turning against you across the continent, and it's also going to strengthen the government in Venezuela, because people don't like seeing people of their country being slaughtered on boats in the Caribbean without any evidence of wrongdoing. And even if there was wrongdoing, that's the Americans have no right to slaughter people like that. And people in Venezuela are obviously outraged. My friends in Venezuela, who I speak with, and you have many more friends, I know, but they are confident that they will be able to overcome the challenges ahead. But it's very painful. It's very painful nowadays to watch what's going on in Sudan, in Gaza, in the Caribbean, in the Pacific. The United States is a rogue regime. It's always been a rogue regime, but nowadays it's worse than ever before. And even if the United States doesn't have any direct responsibility with regarding what's going on in the Sudan, the United Arab Emirates is a small regime closely allied to the United States and Israel. If the United States wanted this to stop, the Emirates would never stand up against Washington.
One man who is having a whale of a time, even if the rest of us are miserable, is Donald Trump. He's on this madcap tour. He's dancing in Malaysia. God knows why the people of Malaysia were encouraged by an Islamist prime minister to greet him in such a way, but they did. Then he's on board American warships, dancing to YMCA with the Japanese prime minister, looking up adoringly into his eyes. Then he's in Korea, and they're presenting him with guilt. At least it looked cheap gold to me. He seems to be on a gigantic narcissistic ego trip. He never seems to be in the United States. He never seems to be talking about the United States. He's talking as if he was the emperor of the world. But he's about to find out when he meets Xi Jinping, isn't he, that actually the emperor has no clothes.
Yes, I think that the negotiations with China will be very tough. Both you and I were recently in China. We were in the same city, but we miss each other by a few hours.
Yeah.
I think that there will be an agreement of sorts between the United States and the Chinese. However, the scope of the agreement is something that I think is unclear so far. But I doubt that Trump will get nearly as much as he pretends that he'll be getting from the Chinese. The Chinese have the upper hand, and they've grown much more confident over the last few years about their position. I think over the last few months, in fact, they've become even more confident. After Liberation Day, when Trump announced those tariffs, and he ultimately had to back down, especially when the bond market became dangerous for the country. The Chinese smelt blood, and that has made ordinary Chinese, or at least the elites that we meet when we're there, much more confident in my view. But if we see that Trump is so arrogant and so happy, it's not because of the Epstein files, and it's not because of all the controversies at home. It is largely because of Muslim leaders, and we saw that in Egypt when we watched that monkey show, and all these regional leaders were surrounding Trump and waiting their turn to be humiliated, putting their hands on their chests to show their friendship and goodwill to this genocidal monster. So when these leaders betray the Palestinian cause the way they do, and they simply go to Cairo to please this man, and in order to get into his good book, then we should not expect anything less than the sort of behavior that we see in Kuala Lumpur, or in Tokyo, or in Seoul.
Well, when Gramsci said almost 100 years ago now that the new world, the old world is dying, the new world struggling to be born, we live in a time of monsters, he can't have imagined the big orange monster that would now be ruling the American empire, and still have a fair few supplicants falling around his feet. Professor Marandi, as always, a pleasure to tour the world with you. Thanks for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows.